All right. Hello, Michael.
Hey, Jack, happy Thursday, and very excited to get your opinion about this paper that you sent me. But
Mm,
before I do that, I really do want to recommend. We often talk about books that we enjoy, each other enjoy
mm,
different books, but this time it's a movie.
mm.
And this movie really, I thought it was really, really good. I don't know. It's weird to see a movie that you just really liked. It's called Robot Dreams.
Oh, uh,
Yes,
how Philip K. Dickish.
100%. Except it's the least Philip K. Dickish movie. Except it is very it's just really touching and hits. It's also doesn't have any words, which I think is a plus.
Mm,
It's really, really, really good. And I think if you watched it with your kids, even it's an animated movie. And it's just really, really well done. And I loved every minute of it. I don't want to spoil anything. You can watch it, but uh, without a doubt, really touched at something important. And also would give me maybe next week's conversation. If you get a chance to watch it, I watch it on a thing called Canopy. I don't know where it's at normally, but have you ever heard of Canopy?
Yeah, I don't have it, never used it, but yeah, I know what it
Oh,
is. Yeah.
well, if you have a library library card, you can use Canopy. So it's basically it's
Oh,
a
cool. Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Mm,
library service that has tons of films that are not normally like the big films because actually, the huge contrast. Just to editorialize, is that there's a movie
mm.
who won the Academy Award called Flow. Have you heard of this movie? Very
No, I didn't.
somewhat similar
Mm,
in some no not thematically at all, but similar to this movie that I said Robot Dreams, which is great.
mm.
But Flow apparently was made on Blender. You know Blender, right?
Wow. Oh, cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
made on Blender by like a team of seven people and won the Academy Award for Best Animation. So that I think might be a good lead into our discussion today,
Yeah.
right? Because that's fairly unprecedented. And I don't believe that the team, I'm not sure, I didn't see the credits roll in the Robot Dreams movie, but it also had that economy, right? That it didn't seem as though it was made like the blockbuster that everyone despises is on Netflix right now that has to do with robots as well, but it cost $350 million.
Mm,
Nobody seems to care for it, including me, because I started watching it and I just thought, like, what in the hell is this, right? Like,
mm,
it wasn't anything, but it was certainly expensive, and that
mm,
might also play in maybe even be a theme through our discussion. So we've been speaking together about these topics for a couple of years at least, and the
mm.
first thing we started talking about is, well, when is the revolution going to come, right? When are people going to start to realize how some of the things we take for granted in our jobs and our lives are going to be affected by, let's not even say AI. I think it's affected by the goal of understanding what we do. That's where my human
Mm.
part comes in because as we know, we attempt, we make efforts. I try to say that we fail a lot, which are all considered terrible things in the world of work. Yet,
Mm.
if we don't fail, we never learn, and therefore we keep kind of repeating the same patterns over again. That's a huge simplification, but
Mm.
um, I
Well,
said a whole
there is
bunch.
another way. You know that there is another ways. So sometimes failure is not the only way to kind of trigger the learning process, right? Sometimes a another trigger could be a very strict educational system. I'm a product of one, and
It's a good
the
point.
Chinese and the Russians, right? They have a different educational system. And I remember my very first lecture in college, for example. It was in an engineering school, and the professor kind of his opening sentence, after "Hello, how are you," was, "Hey, nobody has to be an engineer, and I am here to make sure that only those who have the propensity, will pass the class." That
Oh,
was the first sentence that I've heard, and that kind of got me like a really, a big kick in my butt, so to speak, to really pay attention, so that it's not going to be a walk in the park, that you better pay attention. So yeah, so
well, there's also probably a mindset, and you have caught on to another real topic here, which is a critical thinker says, one thing about critical thinking is when someone else is critical of you, because I can remember clearly the person who said that I had no talent as an artist and should never pursue it, which immediately made me want to go to art school. Because I can also say, and not to go back too far in time, but famously, the same professor who said the same thing to Nikola Tesla, who told him, fuck off, because alternating current is the thing and you're wrong. And literally, he was correct, right? And yet had to suffer all that he went through to come to America. And anyway, blah, blah, blah. But he defied them, right? Like that probably is a huge outlier. But the status quo and maybe even the guarded idea that I know what engineers are, and I will decide whether you are one, is pretty interesting. Although that's totalitarianism, right? I mean, anyone who's kind of says they got it over on you, right? Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's it worked on me, right? I mean,
right. Well, but you're also,
not discouraged,
you wanted to
but a
prove
lot of people would.
yourself. You wanted the challenge, and others may not have really wanted to, right?
Yeah, I don't think anybody left. I think that a lot of people got, so to speak, filtered out,
okay,
by a great number of filtering courses, basically, right? And they would tell you, yeah, this class is a filter, right? You don't pass the very advanced geometry classes, you're not supposed to be an engineer. If you don't pass, advanced calculus, you're not an engineer. If you don't pass, string theory, for example, which is crazy math that as an engineer probably would never use. You're not supposed to be
you had to do it. You said string theory?
Spring.
Spring. Yeah, I was hoping string theory wouldn't count.
Advanced physics was also there, as a kind of like a, addition, right? So, but yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know. Things have changed. This is a different era now. Maybe this is all totalitarian, like you say, but yeah, it was tough.
Well, I meant the idea of an authority. That's all. Like the teacher being the authority on deciding who is what, which I personally have a hard time doing because I realize that the journey is long, right? My hope, and maybe it's a very American thing, right, is that I'm just saying, can I give you a nudge in the right direction, right? I can give you these things, but you have to put yourself into it, and therefore probably, I don't know. It's the paper chase guy. I don't know. I'm going way back, but there's the guy who was taught the law school, and he stood in front of the class at Harvard or wherever, and there's hundreds of students, and he would just stand there and say, "Argue this case, Jack." And he would just sit there in a sense to debate whether or not the person knew what they were doing, had prepared properly, could give anyway. This was the idea. This was law school, right? Is you just practiced, and that's maybe getting more to my failure thing, because the big failures were pretty much big plot points, where he wasn't prepared or somebody was. You see what I mean? And the drama that ensued was, learning how the mechanics worked, I guess, right? How did you graduate through? But professors were definitely the formidable know-it-alls, rather than maybe the way I teach, which is loving and nurturing and self-doubting.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. It seems that the kind of the stricter approach, where the authoritarian kind of professor kind of shows the way, and it's my way or the highway, seems to be improving test scores. So I
Well,
don't
sure,
know.
but that also includes an empirical view, right? That there is an
Mhm.
answer, and the answer is well
Mhm.
known. It's just you have to find your way to the answer, and that is
Mhm.
another thing in the human part, that there is no answer. We can talk game theory for a while, but you see what I mean. The
Mhm.
answer is it depends, which is kind of what I've been trying to point out for the past few discussions and posts, right? Is about how numbers lie,
Mhm.
and that if you base all of your decisions on numbers, it's just lie compounding on lies, and what you actually really need to understand is qualitative things.
Yeah, and you are absolutely right. So everything has changed. I mean, the engineering school that I attended, a couple of decades ago, has changed, a number of times. Like the first big change was a spreadsheet uh, as a tool to make complex calculations, right? So something that I needed to kind of spend, a couple of weeks on doing projects, like designing a bridge, for example. It was 100 pages of calculations, right? And then around the time I was in grad school, somebody came up with Excel spreadsheet, and now they kind of put everything as a template into a spreadsheet. So you just typed, 10 numbers at the beginning of the project, like how big the bridge is supposed to be, how much material, or how, what kind of steel you allow. You press enter, right? And there you go, 2 weeks of work, right? And you got a
Yeah,
number, you got a design.
but what you're saying is your human methodology, which is slow and deliberate and not necessarily bad, right? Because then at least in your mind, you can maybe understand when you make a mistake. Whereas if you just trusted the agent, let's call it that, right? Like you
Mm,
don't know if it's right or not. You don't have any
mm,
model of it, but you can learn it. It's like playing the guitar. I keep saying, like, we
mm.
all wish we could just go up and blaze our guitar solo, but no, it takes thousands of hours of
Yeah,
learning where to put your fingers. But I know
yeah.
that I can play a fake guitar that can literally blaze, and I cannot, you see what I mean? I have one on my iPad, right? It'll just do the chords for you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So who
So
is who is the better musician, right? Or who is the better engineer? Somebody who can produce a product that has a higher complexity because all the tedious, all the kind of numbers or technically oriented stuff is transferred to a spreadsheet or to a tool, right? And you don't have to do that, which gives you time to kind of design better, maybe, right? Or build something better or create a better product. Or you just abstracted out everything and you are not really an engineer because you don't know what's going on under the hood. I mean, you will not know what's going under the hood unless you spend, months and months and months doing the math and kind of comparing, the results that you're getting, learning that, hey, you made a calculation wrong here because that pillar or that beam is way too small. I mean, you can see it's too small, right? I mean, so you have to have an error in your calculations, or you will, you know in a musical kind of area, you probably may not hear all the kind of dissonances, or problems with the sound is coming out from the speaker. So one way or another, right? I mean, what is better now? We are going to the higher level of abstraction because you can just tell the AI, hey, give me the spreadsheet that will make the calculation, or you will just say, hey, give me something that sounds like Joe Satriani, and you don't even have to bother, pushing the buttons, to kind of create his chords, right? So I think that is a problem, right? I mean, this has got to be a problem.
I think that's been the great discussions that we've had, because you brought it up. I think, I mean, in my own mind, at least in my own discipline, that's just the beginning of your problems. The point is the engineering is still only the beginning of all the problems. And let me see if I can segue this, if you don't mind. I'm
Mhm.
going to, you gave me a great paper, and I'm not sure if you read it, but it's our good friend Barry Scannell in Dublin. So happy Patrick's Day. And he
Mhm.
wrote a lot, a lot about everything, including a lot of the subjects that you and I are fascinated with. But I wanted to bring up this the idea of what comes next. So here we go. So the word for today, and it's getting back to robots a little bit. So with me so far is agentic, right? So I think our fantasy is, and please watch the movie and tell me that we can create this thing that's sort of like us, right? Because that's this very human thing since Prometheus and all this. We've always wanted this kind of like things that look like us but have these special powers, right? And we've invented it in the sense that there's a little thing that can talk or type to us that has these special powers, and we're amazed by it, right? Because unlike Python code or whatever, or even engineering schematics, like you need to know a special language to understand those and to even find them to be interesting, right? Nobody goes through, hey, let me get schematics monthly. Maybe there's some good schematics this month. What about, you see what I mean? People tend to be very focused when they need engineering. They don't have to study all engineering in order to make whatever. But let's say transformation beyond, and I might need to read this. Let me see if I can get through it. Beyond specific industries, agentic AI will transform fundamental institutional functions across sectors. Consider decision-making processes. Organizations typically rely on meetings, presentation, reports, and management hierarchies to collect information, evaluate options, and reach decisions. Sound familiar, right? Agentic systems will increasingly augment or replace these mechanisms, continually monitoring operational data, generating alternatives, simulating outcomes, and recommending optimal choices at machine speed. Similar coordination functions performed by middle management, so apparently today Amazon laid off all their middle managers, right, will be increasingly automated. Agentic systems will track projects, identify bottlenecks, reallocate resources, maintain alignment across distributed teams with minimal human intervention. Seriously, right? We said this 2 years ago. This will enable flatter organizational structures and more distributed decision rights, fundamentally changing design principles that have dominated for decades. There's a little bit more, but how are we so far? I mean,
we are doing great. I think we are great.
Well, except being 2 years later, I will say knowledge management, how organizations capture, distribute, and apply collective expertise will undergo comparable transformation. Rather than residing in documents, databases, or employees' heads, organizational knowledge will increasingly live within agentic systems that can apply it contextually, expand it through continuous learning, and make it accessible through natural language interfaces. And this will redefine competitive advantage as proprietary algorithms and data become less differentiating than effective integration of agentic capabilities. It's a lot, right?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with all that. It sounds great. Yeah, I mean, to an AI person, it's definitely music to my ears, and also agentic person. I probably mentioned this several times, but I'm going to mention it again. A number of maybe 20 years ago at a conference, I was at an agentic conference, and there was some very strong representation from Carnegie Mellon and all those places where kind of do computer science and robotics as well. And then somebody at the conference says that, hey, you computer science guys, everything to you is an agent, even though it's just an ordinary program, right? So now we are again, in that agentic craziness so maybe the first thing to do would be to kind of define an agent, right? And so.
Well, this is where our banter. Well, because, and I'm just going to take one example, which is self-driving cars. Okay, so here's the thing: it's kind of agentic. We've seen it. We've experienced it. I've experienced it, I think, right? And you've been in one of these before, haven't you?
I was a little scared, so yeah, but I wrote some code that was guiding a autonomous drone or autonomous robot. So yeah, but self-driving car, I would be a little bit nervous.
Well, I will say that I found it to be a pretty a pretty amazing experience, except for the idea that I was driving, but I wasn't driving. And that was to me the biggest disconnect, which is going to get to the problem with humans part, right? Which is, yeah, in this realm, having an agent that can do things for you or just do things on their own, I think, well, I don't think it works the way they think it works. I think what's really going to be the problem is maybe back to engineering. Knowing all the math, you can sit there and be an architect. If you've never built a building before, you can just stop there, right? Like, I only optimize plans. Real world things suck. Right? The real world is complicated. And the reason why I think self-driving cars is a good example is you've got a really well-defined problem space, which is still monumental. That everything about every road in the world is pretty amazing, right? You've got a data set that's pretty incomparably good, right? The mapping part is what I mean. Like, you know what a road is, and the rules and all this other stuff, which allows agentic things to happen. And I'm like, the minute you veer, whether it's any way, robots alone are the worst example of this. Like, you can't veer a minutia without immediately falling into all the problems of the real world, which we, speaking of agents, take years, if not decades, to figure out, right? Like, we don't come out fully formed, going to engineering school, right? Like, we have a huge learning curve, and all of that is real, right? It's not, and I'm not saying that, I don't think it matters who you are, you've learned to navigate this world, which is no mean feat, right? The world that you're in. That is not a well-defined, I'm saying these data sets now become extremely vague, right? And the idea that somehow that learning could happen in a unorganized world, and I've been doing that, and both of us, right? We want to go into organizations and try to understand, like, what is it you're doing, and where is all that qualitative info, right? Where's that persuasive presentation that you approved 6 months ago that went south? Well, what was it about this? Was it the chart that went up and said how much money you're going to make? Is that how you based your decision? Or was it the person was, really having a good day and just really, turn the lights on? And that's what I'm keep saying is, no, these are all emotional decisions. Every decision is emotional, has nothing to do with data. And that's actually proven. Right? That it is trust. If you don't trust the self-driving car, which you are perfectly fine not to, I'm just amazed they work at all, if you see what I mean. But they're in the most well-defined problem space. The minute you go into any of the big companies you and I work for, right, everything goes south, right? Like, there is no data in a way, right? You can see salaries, you can see time worked, you can see how many boondoggle conferences they attended in a year, but you can't correlate that into performance and or worth or value. And those are the things I really start to feel like this will, you can't get there from here. This agentic thing, I don't think can work.
Well,
not for humans.
Maybe you are
work
right
for non-humans, but that's even weirder, right? But keep going. You can shoot me down.
I don't know. I mean, you might be right. You might actually be right. However, right, if you are wrong, then the agentic system is probably the best architecture that has a chance of working.
Right? Sorry, say again.
So if you are wrong, however, right, if you are wrong, then the agentic architecture is the architecture that has the highest probability of actually work on complex problems, especially if this is a multi-agentic architecture where you have like basically a swarm of agents that can be applied to a problem. So talking about the car situation, right, it's Yes, a car is an agent, right? That has sensors and can process information. It can have a big computer in it, really kind of have a lot of power. But it's infinitely an easier problem for the agent to solve if the agent can talk to another car and kind of say, hey, that car is slowing down right now. So I don't have to detect that event through my sensors. I can just ask the other car, hey, are you slowing down? Yes, I am, right? Or are you swerving left, right? Or whatever, right? So, or, even simpler example, right? Let's say traffic cone, right? It's infinitely easier for the traffic cone to have a little beacon kind of broadcasting, hey, I am a traffic cone here at this GPS coordinates or whatever, rather than maybe having the agent within the car to detect it, maybe in low visibility or whatever. It's an infinitely easier thing if that cone can talk to you, and if that cone can talk to you, it's a multi-agent system now that you are working with. So yeah, you might be you might be right on the qualitative kind of level of reasoning, right? Like, for example, I mean, I don't want to do a gruesome kind of example, but let's say there is
Amongst friends.
there is kind of five bunnies running across the street, on that side of the street, and then there is two bunnies that are running, on the other side of the street, and your autopilot has to make a decision to swerve, because there is no other place.
Yeah,
Is it
trolley
supposed to
problem.
swerve? Is it supposed to swerve into the group of five bunnies, or is it supposed to swerve into a group of two bunnies? Both decisions are wrong, right? Or both decisions are incorrect, but you have to make a decision. So what are you gonna do, right? So that is the qualitative kind of level of the problem. So yeah, so I don't know, but I think multi-agent systems have a lot of potential to solve a lot of problems.
Well, I certainly think what's interesting about this paper is how quickly utopian, change happens. Whereas both of us know change is extremely slow. And I think that to me is one of the more important themes that I'm trying to understand, even though the idea of AI is very new and it's very exciting and it does change very often, people don't. So right now we're in year, what would it be, 11, 12, I guess, of smartphones, phones that are connected to the internet. And in this very short time, what has changed? Well, we've started to feel as though more services and ideas and whatever interactions can now happen on a computer rather than in real life, right? You don't have to go to the ticket office, wait in line, to get those Taylor Swift tickets that I know you want to get, right? You'll just say, no, I will go online and do it, right? I know now that many goods and services are better served through online. I don't have to call up someone and give my food order, which was one of our first friends, our friend Adam and I. Adam came in and said, what if all the restaurant menus were online and you could just order online? And I said, God, the data problems alone are really challenging. And they are. But services have come around and they got enough funding and we're in a great place because we keep investing in order to make really good data sets. Like apparently now there's a taxonomy and understanding of food ordering, which didn't exist before, right? There was no reason to. Menus were a thing you could write on a chalkboard, but now you can't. You need to go on a site and fill it in. I don't even know
Yeah.
how they do it, right? But at least to them, the motivation is well, if I don't go in and I don't fill this in, I can't sell as much food, which means bad things, right? I need to sell a lot of food or else I am not going to make it against people who make it easier. So this rush to convenience may be another topic, but I think it's even more convenient to have an agent. You see what I mean? And my experience in driving a car was so unpleasant to have it drive for me because the amount of effort I put into driving is not very large. You know, I mean, I'm not overtaxed by driving, although I do probably curse twice as
Mm.
much when I'm in the car than I ever do. Um, so, but you're solving real problems, right? You're saying you are out there trying to make a data taxonomy out of many very real processes that happen within an institution, right? And I'm sure you're struggling. That's all I'm saying is I don't think it was ever made to be a clean, easy to use data model.
Yeah, yeah. So when we go down to data, I think that is also revolutionary. So, I mean, I think that paper that you're quoting has like a lot of sections to it, and they're kind of going into like kind of
Yeah.
textbook like yeah. Uh, but the thing about the data, like hey, if you want to create some sort of a food service, then oh, there's the taxonomy. Maybe you have to go to your favorite SharePoint form and type it in, and then Microsoft will display it as a website, and then you click on something, and there you go, you can order, right? I think that is kind of also going away, because now with the AI, you don't need that, right? You don't need the taxonomy. The AI understands the table. Or if you don't have a table, if you just kind of type something off the cuff or dictate, right? Hey, today we are selling donuts and chocolate cake and tiramisu, right? You don't need to type it in a form. You don't need to have it in a structured or semi-structured way. You can just dump it on the AI, and the AI will kind of understand. Okay, so here's an item. Maybe you are selling donuts as items, or maybe you are selling cake by weight, or whatever. So you can get all that. So that translation layer is no longer necessary, because it's sitting within the intelligence of the large language model, so to speak, right? So that is a truly revolutionary thing. So a lot of the problems that we've been talking about so far, with the ETL, ELT, all the layers, transformations, cleanups, that may be kind of a moot point, because you are storing information now in the kind of like in the system that involves intelligence and pretty much arbitrary data format. Uh, and if that is a big chunk of data, then the AI will use a tool, let's say SQL, to kind of do something that is extracting or whatever, right? If it is a small piece, maybe it's not going to be necessary anything. Just the AI is going to read this, and it's going to kind of be able to do or display a website, or maybe answer your question. Right? So maybe you will be ordering food not by going to a website and clicking on the how many donuts you want. You're just going to go to one of the large language model, GPT services, and you say, hey, GPT, I need 3 donuts and 5 tiramisu cakes because I feel hungry today, right? And by the way, I'm going to be hungry every Friday, right? So it will set up the transaction for you, right? So, that is truly revolutionary, I think.
Well, I love your your example is interesting, yet again, it gets back to this self-driving thing. The amount of convenience that already exists in an imperfect world, right? A imperfect world where you have to browse. This is another thing that I'm particularly interested in, maybe next time, is to be agentic, you have to be proactive. Right? I mean, we always talk about this as I want some donuts and cake. But
Mm.
honestly, I would much prefer, and I see some people trying this, is like, no, you need to eat chickpeas and you need to exercise.
Mm.
Which, by the way, is 1000% true. Yet making that leap, I still don't think we have even contemplated AI services that say no. Which, by the way, I should get back to work on that one. because saying no, like your professor, right, is outrageously motivating, for God's sake. I mean, it did everything to form your character that they said you're not going to make it.
And yeah, I totally agree,
Right?
right? So,
Yeah. And AI
so,
is never going to say no, at least not currently.
so
And
it's
by
just
the
a
way, it'll
question of
make
the
it up too.
architecture.
Huh?
It's just a question of the architecture, though, right? Because in my example, I
Yeah.
was talking directly to a bakery AI, right? Maybe,
Or
right? But
something. Yeah.
what if instead of talking to the bakery, I will talk to my personal agent,
Right.
something like in the novels by Jack McDewitt. In his sci-fi world, everybody's got an agent that is like an avatar in its 3D display or whatever, and they
Sure.
will kind of answer your emails or kind of go on the video phones, if you are away from office, and it's going to be yours, right? And that agent will know kind of the things that like, hey, I'm supposed to be on a diet, right? So yeah, you might want to tell the agent, hey, order me 5 pieces of chocolate cake, but the agent will say, hey, maybe you are on a diet, right? So yeah, I can do that, but
Yeah, but you're starting to see then that people don't work that way, right? And they will just go and order it themselves or whatever. Will they accept the self-driving car because it's convenient, but when the self-driving car says, really, you should walk, it's much better for you. If you're only going this far, you should just walk. I mean, it's almost comic. I really want to see this scene built out, right? Like, because saying no for your own benefit is what agents should be, right? We can talk about it in terms of health maintenance or something, right? To say, hey, last time you went and got your blood checked, uh, you needed to change your diet, and certainly this order of yours violates that. I mean, this agent is never going to happen, is the point. It can never, ever, ever happen. Yet it's easy to imagine. And that gets us back to robots that have feelings and care for us and do our bidding, right? Like it's a magical thought for some reason because we're scared, we don't like the outside world. We can fail. We could see what I mean. There's all this sort of thing about I mean, I actually watch a lot of people who are like, I'm going to subsist on my own food, and it's really fun because it's extremely challenging and actually doesn't work. You know what I mean? Like you cannot be self-sufficient. And we should never want to be because we have society to help us with all this. And I think that that's why philosophically AI is so interesting, right? Because that's why we keep talking, is that what problem is it really solving? And for our kids, of course, it's the worst problem because they already know too much convenience in my mind, right? Remember going out and playing after school or walking home after school? Sorry, we'll just age ourselves, right? But
yeah.
there was nothing but good memories, even when I was being chased by bullies. At least you know, whatever. I experienced life on my own terms. I wasn't picked up, put in a back seat with a television in front of me, right? That to me was when something went awry. And now that you say, hey, there's an agent, so you never have to, what exactly? I'm just wondering if we're going to go back to well, I think, will we go back, we turn it all off and then try to go back to let's do things the manual way again. Here, we're going to go to the thing and we're not going to have a slideshow. We're going to have a whiteboard.
Hmm.
And I will say personally, the best experience teaching I ever had was when the projector bulb burnt out and I had to write on the whiteboard my lesson.
Hmm.
And for the first time ever, people started to pay attention. And the reason why was I could just shove stuff in front of them. You see what I mean? Like, and no
Yeah,
one
yeah.
was understanding anything. But the minute you slow down, right? It's that thing like people don't work
Yeah.
this fast. They never will. They can't. I don't think it's possible for us to even to reach focus until after, what are we in, almost an hour. Can we ever focus in conversation? Can we focus enough to read is a big one for me, right? That
Hmm.
that sitting and reading requires a great deal of focus.
Yeah. Well, I think we kind of got ourselves into a corner because, I started giving examples that are extremely loaded, like, like eating, the health problems, and all that stuff, is a very loaded example. And then education is maybe even more, right? I
True.
mean, maybe it would be easier to kind of get into examples that are kind of like, hey, here's AI, here's the multi-agents, and here's, like washing the dishes, right? Or gassing up a car or something like that, where it's kind of like a lot less emotional kind of load, and a lot fewer parameters to discuss that exist around it, right? So yeah, so it kind of would make our arguments totally different probably. But at the end of the day, uh, maybe I don't know, manufacturing, I mean, dangerous jobs, for example, right? Maybe is the robot that is kind of placed in a place that is very dusty, very unhealthy, very noisy, or whatever, is that robot a good thing? And maybe it should be, right? So then the question would be, okay, so how is the robot put together? Well, it can be put together manually by programming and whatever engineering, or the AI can be kind of applied and kind of boom, right? And it's going to be a lot easier to build something like that, right? So but then still there is going to be, hey, but then maybe that robot is replacing 10 or 20 jobs, and maybe humans are supposed to be doing them with appropriate level of safety, clothing and protection. It still should be done by humans, because what's the alternative, right? So
Well,
I
like
mean,
undersea diving, I think that James Cameron guy, he keeps going underwater for some
exactly,
reason. It's a very dangerous place and
yeah,
often kills you. But
yeah,
I think that's what's odd. Like you don't have to go down there.
yeah, you don't have to, and
You don't
there's
have to
people who
climb that
love it,
stupid
right?
Mount Everest. Speaking of a stupid thing to do, like
Yeah,
why? Right?
yeah.
It's terrible. There's no oxygen. Why would you do it? Well,
Yeah, and there
that's
is and
yeah.
there is like caravans of people doing this, like all the time.
Well, and that's where I do not think that there's amazing uses, right? I think it's the use cases as we extrapolate them, and I'm kind of giving it to this guy being fairly heavily extrapolative, right? And I don't know that these ideas are not influential. What I try to understand at a macro level is that things are much more cyclical than you think. Things get better and then they get worse, and they get better and then they get, there's cycles to everything that just happen. And what happens is that you can be lucky, meaning you do something and then cyclically things are going to get better, but then you think that what you did made things better. You have a false correlation, right? Just saying that's life, right? Hey, I decided to gamble and I won a lot of money, so I'm going to continue to gamble because I'm lucky is
Mm.
obviously completely false, but yet is absolutely a motivator for many people's behavior, right? So when you bring in these agentic ideas, it's sort of like, well, obviously you can enhance some low level tasks, but do you want, is that a benefit to you? Sooner or later when the EMT goes off, you know, will you know how to grow food or bake bread or whatever? Like, I don't know if even people really know how to do a lot of things anymore because those things are very error prone and take a lot of time. But once you've learned them, you got skills, as they say, right? You have skills that won't go away. Your engineering skills will not evaporate
Mm.
no matter what.
Yeah, and that seems to be the world that, let's say, sci-fi authors in their novels kind of seem to be actually preferring as a kind of like a portrayal of the ideal world, right? Where there is AI and people are just kind of living kind of quiet life, baking bread, in places that look like Winnetka maybe. And if they wanna do gardening, there you go, garden the whole day. if you want to work, there's a museum, you're gonna work in a museum, or you're gonna be doing research as a professor, but you really don't have to because you have an AI that kind of discovered everything. So, but if you want to be a professor, go with God, right? So that seems to be the the best case scenario, right? The kind of like middle of the
Oh,
road
yeah.
scenario in the sci-fi or near sci-fi kind of scenarios is something that looks like maybe the initial scenes of the latest Alien movie, the Romulus, right, where essentially, hey, we terraform the planet, you go there, it's always dark, you're gonna work crazy hours, digging, mining or something terribly terribly expensive thing, and it's really kind of more like a medieval slavery rather than rather than real life, even though maybe you have healthcare that is perfect, maybe you have robots that can help you with, but still it's a terrible life that you are trying to escape to, maybe some sort of another planet, which is just a rural kind of
Total Recall.
economic model.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly, right. So you can see, there's this question is very difficult to answer that you are trying to pose here, and maybe that multi-planetary kind of vision that Elon has, is really not it's not that multiple paradise that are waiting for us, right? It's going to be like multi-planetary kind of like really tough life,
Oh,
very dangerous.
well,
And
I think they just got off the space station, and I can only assume that when you have 4 or 5 people in a cooped up area, that
yeah,
it can't be that good,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And that's
yeah,
only a few people at a cost of hundreds of millions of dollars, right? To not
yeah.
take, like you said, not taking care of 4 people at the cost of $100 million is pretty poor investment, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and now we've got, I think we found AI, and now agentic, if there is an agentic AI, is falling in cost at a astronomical rate, right? It certainly isn't getting more expensive. It's getting better and less expensive, more so than even processing power gets. Doesn't increase that often.
Yeah, but the OpenAI is now saying that, hey, a PhD level AI will be like 10 grand a month or something like that, or a year. So this is a subscription. So there's going to be tiers, that's another thing that we were worried about, right? Like there's going to be tiers of AI, and, your
Well,
dishwashing
but
AI is
that's
going to be,
terrifying. It costs you $200,000 to get a PhD. Sorry, we can do this one next week, but right? I mean, it's an enormous investment, and it takes about 10 years or so. I don't know. I mean, whatever. To get a PhD, you have to come from where you came from, which is a real confidence to learn from people who are willing to teach you, and taking on a really challenging topic, right? Engineering is 1000%. To be trustworthy is something that's essential, because you don't want things falling apart, right? And engineering, for the most part, is extremely reliable, more than it ever was. Remember, we used to have those cars that fell apart all the time, right? So if we gotten better at it, probably by replacing people skills with automation, which is good, robots putting cars together more accurately than people could, making fewer errors. But then people are displaced. You lose economic ability, like Detroit, right? You just don't have a Detroit anymore.
yeah,
Which is really where it's sort of like, how are you harnessing technology in a way that is beneficial to more than it is detrimental? And sometimes there's no way around it, right? You're just gonna have to break eggs in order to get, and right now we can't put it back into the
yeah,
bottle. But I still think we don't have,
the genie is out of the bottle. Yeah,
it's
yeah,
out of the
there's no
bottle.
question. Yeah.
Well, and part of our enjoyable conversation, I think, has been trying to figure out, maybe, right? Because it still isn't there. You and I both were there when, I think, at least to me, I was there when Google came out, right? That was big for me. because we were one of the few people that knew that it existed. We were people who were very engaged in computing, and it just so happened here was this way that you could take this insurmountable amount of crap and find something in it, right? That pretty miraculous job, and it did a really good job of it, right? And better than anyone else. And then I think when they started to do autocomplete, I thought that's when it really hit, that idea that the agent can recommend things to you was similar to me to autocomplete, right? I don't quite know what I want, but it knows what I can do, and it'll kind of help tell me that. And now that's more baked in, right? It isn't trying to wait for me to ask. It's going to be proactive. It's going to maybe push me into decisions, which, to come full circle, the character in this Robot Dreams, has this experience of having this agent, and nothing that you think will happen actually happens, but other things happen that make it even more interesting, I think, as a story. Let's just say, I'll leave it open because it isn't tracked to our discussion completely. But when I see this and I think of the fantasy, that's what I worry about, because the fantasy is always fun until you have it come true. And then it's maybe not so good. Like your novels, I think, all get there, right? Like, hey, it's great that we all can live in the metaverse, but that just means the world is terrible. And the metaverse is now, another whole different set of problems. Right?
Yeah, and yeah, and maybe to kind of also on the meta level, I think the AI as a force in the economy or in the society is really not the number one force. I think maybe
the very new. This is all new. Yeah. I think
Yeah. So what could be that, right? I mean, if we are talking about the shape of the economy and the society, right? Maybe the economic theories that drive, either explicitly or implicitly, because there is a very good chance that our leaders have actually no idea what kind of economic.
They never have.
Yeah.
That's the point. And they make all this shit up, but that's fine because we don't change instantly. Is the great deal. Like we don't.
But it has a huge impact. I mean, it has a huge impact on let's say it's the everyday stuff, like the jobs, whether you have one or not, whether you can afford the house or not, or whether you can afford the car.
100%.
So all that stuff is percolating into our lives, and now we have a disruptive force like an AI that is kind of putting everything in a blender, right? But still, the outcome is far from being certain, and you are trying to kind of drop some ingredients, maybe some economic incentives here, economic incentives there, but it's really still just a blender mixing, and the outcome is may not taste very well, very good.
Well, for sure, from 2 years back when this seemed very new and novel and like that early Google, it's now much more pervasive. And having read this and seeing people's reaction and even our own discussions getting a lot of traction, people are curious, and that's good because they should be. It's a very curious puzzle, but it is influencing our imaginations. And unfortunately, depending on the person that you are, your imagination can go in ways that are not going to be overall beneficial to the more people, right? We are still selfish, and we do things sometimes for our own gain, and even if others do not benefit. It's the way it's always been, and certainly college professors are not immune to this either, right? But the hope is that when something becomes really cheap, I'm interested. How's that, right? Because as economics go, if things are expensive, like going to a doctor or talking to a lawyer or running a company or or building a product is extremely expensive, you probably will fail more and by never even starting, right? You'll just say that's too hard. It's too hard to grow a garden. I'm not even going to start, right? Yet, if you can get that nudge, maybe it's an agentic AI that nudges you to improve your diet and nudges, you see what I mean, to be nicer to your kids and whatever, right? Like that can be a positive force that people do benefit from. And if it's cheap, hey, my father was a psychologist, right? You know, he didn't work for free and he only spoke to a few people. Sorry, right? Like he hated to write, so he never wrote a book that could have helped anyone. You see what I mean? Even if he could have, and I do think he could have because he had some really, sound ideas, I think. But again, our own influence is small. Now you've got this much bigger influence. And as we say, we're both curious as to what will happen next.
Yeah.
Hopefully not robots. I really don't. I don't want robots. Wonderful week as always, Jack. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. As always, it's just fun. I just think this is where it's gonna happen, right? It's not one or the other. But
yeah,
we'll figure out what to do from here. All right.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Yeah. Until next time.